All right, so welcome to BoundbyWine's Behind the Vineyard. So today our guest is a veteran in and around McLaren Vale. I hope that doesn't make you sound too old, Peter. We are very
Hi,
honored and privileged to be introducing Peter Fraser with us today. Hi, Peter. How are you?
thank you. Thanks for having me.
How's it
Great
over
to
there?
Yeah, it's great. We've been doing a bit of tasting and a bit of blending, and so it's a good day.
Good. It's just after harvest season, isn't it?
Yeah. So we finished harvest at kind of mid-April, and it's always kind of busy with a bit of kind of all the wines finishing fermentation and malolactic fermentation, and now just kind of the little bit more laid back time of just looking after all the wines.
Awesome. Well, Peter is, of course, the driving force behind the Wines of Yangarra estate. You've been in Yangarra for about 20 years now, is that right?
Yeah, 21 years since,
Wow.
so since the beginning of 2001, and so yeah, 20 years. I've worked with this property since 1998, so
It's been a
quite a long
while.
time. Yeah.
So you started off in 96 in around Barossa Valley?
Yeah, I started probably in the early 90s in terms of my studies, and my first official harvest was at the university, where we all made wine, and then in 96 I worked at St Hallett Wines in the Barossa Valley, both 96 and 97. And then I came to Clarendon working for a company called Norman's Wines, and through to 2000, and then 2001 onwards with Yangarra.
And you stayed ever since.
Pretty much. And in between some of that time, I did a harvest in Spain in 1999, and about 6 or 7 harvests in California, making Shiraz through the central coast of California.
That's a very wide range of regions you got there.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, in just to cover, a little bit about in 2005 and 6, Yangarra actually won International Winery of the Year from Wine and Spirits, along with a couple of awards in 17 for your Ironheart Shiraz and the whole bunch Shiraz.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that?
Look, we've been very fortunate. We have an amazing vineyard. We've been very fortunate that the wines have been recognised by some of the leading wine writers around the world for their quality, and I think their varietal character, their representation of the region, and we'd like to hope that our wines are being recognised as some of the best of our region, McLaren Vale, and in amongst that, some of, for example, our Grenache, our High Sands Grenache, which won James Halliday's Wine Companion Wine of the Year, that it can represent some of the best Grenache in the world. So I think it stems from having a wonderful vineyard. We also have a really amazing team that are all very detail focused, and when it comes from the winery perspective, there's a kind of a lot of attention to detail and the same goes for the management of the vineyard. So it's very much everybody being on the same kind of page in having a perfectionist like kind of mentality, the way we grow and make our wines.
Awesome. Well, what got you hooked in this industry to start with?
I always kind of had a fascination with agriculture, and I love kind of, I suppose, the production side, and I knew that I would kind of go into agriculture, and amongst that, I kind of fell in love with wine. And I suppose for a young person, the very exciting thing about wine is that you get to grow it,
Yes.
but then you actually get to kind of make something that people get to enjoy. And I suppose, unlike if you're growing food, it's something that also lasts for a very long time. So, it's incredibly rewarding to be seeing somebody drinking a wine that you maybe made 20 years ago.
I would think so.
So yeah, it's a very kind of, once you get the bug, it's incredibly rewarding and becomes very much, part of your lifestyle.
Awesome. Well, can you share a little bit about how you stumbled into Yangarra, actually?
So I've been involved in this property since 1998. The company I work for bought the property in 98, and I sort of moved there. Been working with our vineyard manager here since 98 as well. And so we've worked together for, nearly 23 years. Then I met the Jackson family, and who are based in California, and they were very keen to develop something in Australia. And the kind of rest is history. They employed me, and we began a search of to buy, a property that would kind of fit their values of quality, etc. And and then I think it was probably 6 to 9 months later, so December 2001, that we purchased the estate that is now known as Yangarra.
Awesome. Well, just for our listeners here to visualize, could you just describe the area around McLarenville? I must think it's a site.
Look, the McLaren Vale is very coastal. It's kind of described as a Mediterranean climate, and it's our vineyard is probably only maybe 15 kilometers from the beach. So when I say it is, and we're one of the further vineyards from the coast in McLaren Vale. We're actually up in the kind of hills area. We're about 210 meters above sea level. So there's wonderful kind of influences of both elevation and also the coastal climate. Warm enough to ripen Rhone varietals such as Grenache and Shiraz, but cool enough to allow kind of a longer, slower ripening period, so that the wines kind of retain a lovely freshness.
So is that why, Yangarra decided to, introduce grape varietals that are commonly seen in the southern Rhone region, where
Yes.
bush vine Grenache is, common?
Yeah. So if you look back in the history of McLaren Vale, Grenache and Shiraz always had a long history in this region, and I think our climate is relatively similar to the Rhone, to the southern Rhone especially. While I would say that Grenache and Shiraz are probably the main kind of attraction to McLaren Vale, Grenache is actually only it's quite a lot of the old vines were pulled out in the 80s, unfortunately, just through that time of, so Grenache is only actually 6% of McLaren Vale. So it's actually in relatively small production. But I suppose since that time, 25 years later, people have realized how great Grenache is, and what's such a beautiful, it's having a lot of popularity, and because of its scarcity is really growing in popularity and somewhat in price. McLaren Vale has great opportunities, some of the other Mediterranean varieties, so maybe some of the Italian varieties, Viano and Vermentino, but we've kind of chosen that to grow varieties that that are probably more native to the Southern Rhone area.
Might you consider growing Viano?
No.
Oh no, why not?
Only because I think it's very important to be a specialist and for people to associate what you do and to clearly understand what you're good at. And I think there's some wonderful, Italian varieties grown in McLaren Vale by certain producers. And I think if everybody is all doing the same thing, or you also do lots of different things, it becomes very hard for people to understand, what you do. So we've kind of kept it very focused around the Southern Rhone varietals.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's like going to a restaurant, right? If you have like 20 items versus 3 items, you're going to do good.
Exactly. And so we want to keep it really simple for the people that follow Yangarra, and they know exactly kind of, what we are about.
Right. Well, you guys are actually the first in Australia to commercially plant Grenache Blanc. I mean, how did you guys do it, and what spurred it on?
Look, we were I wouldn't say we were necessarily the first. We were one of the first.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working. We were trying to be the first. We actually started well before we actually planted it to bring in some of those Southern Rhone varieties. The quarantine process of bringing in new grapevines is very slow. Mm-hmm. And we're very fortunate that a local nursery in the Barossa Valley were able to bring in some of the Southern Rhone varieties for us that have never, not in recent years, ever been in Australia. So I'm trying to think, our first release was 2018. And we probably, our first plantings maybe started in 2014. So, it's a long, vineyards are a long, slow process. But what we have done, and as far as I'm aware, we're the kind of first producer to kind of produce a full Southern Rhone blend using the majority of the Southern Rhone or Chateauneuf de Pape varieties. So Grenache Blanc, Pic Paul, Claret, Bourbelanc, and Roussanne. And so we're very proud of that. We think these varieties are very much suited to our region. They ripen quite late. So they're actually ripening in the cooler part of the ripening season. And so far we've had a few vintages of it now, and they're really proving to be very popular.
Well, for our listeners to just to let them know that Grenache Blanc is actually a full-bodied white, isn't it? It originated Correct. In the northern Spain.
Northern Spain, and I believe somewhere around the Priorat areas. It might also be in the some of those higher areas of around Madrid, but and often is blended with Macabeo in Spain, and then but it is the major white variety planted in Chateauneuf de Pape.
Awesome. Well, I just want to touch a little bit about biodynamic farming. Recently, in recent years, it's come up a lot. For our listeners who don't know what that is, can you briefly explain what exactly is biodynamic farming? I mean, you guys started in 2012.
We started in 2008, so we were certified in 2012. And in simplicity, biodynamic starts with organic farming. So it starts with not using any synthetic chemicals. So not using herbicide, not using synthetic fertilizers. And basically, biodynamic adds an extra dimension. So there's a couple of things that are really important, and it's encouraging the biodiversity of plants, biodiversity of microbiology in the soil. So you're really trying to enhance the natural life cycles that go on within the soil, and the relationship, and really trying to encourage the relationship between the plants you're growing and the soil. And so that's in its simplicity. And then there's other things like, there's some biodynamic preparations that are sprayed out in the vineyard that encourage more biological activity in the soil, and also, some of the more energy forces that, and that's a complex thing to explain. But I would say that, the analogy I would give is that if you walk into a room and there's somebody in the room that's hosting you, that's full of life and energy and excited, everybody else around them shares that energy. Yeah. But if, you walk into a room where somebody's sad and mopey, and, everybody else starts to get affected by that energy. And it's one of the simplest way I can describe, how biodynamics connects all the living forms and enhances the energy. So it really is ultimately about looking after your soil and making it gaining more biodiversity, and a healthier, more natural system for growing your grapes. Ultimately, we want to grow grapes that reflect the soil that they grow in. And so all those biological cycles allow the vines to take up the natural mineral elements that are in the soil, which ultimately go into the grapes and hopefully add the unique taste to our special site. So that's our ultimate end goal, and why we do such farming. And the spin-offs is it's good for the environment, and you're also drinking a wine that has not had any harmful synthetic chemicals used to grow it or make it.
Right. Does the climate in McLarenville kind of help that, because it's kind of dry and warm, which may eliminate the use for all the fungicides, etc.
We're very lucky. I would say that our climate is much more conducive to growing, but I would say there's great vineyards growing in the world with biodynamic practices in cold vineyards, so it can be done. But our job is a little bit easier because we have a very lovely mild climate where we grow our grapes.
Awesome. Well, Yangarra's philosophy is, to respect this special piece of country is evident in the wines that you guys make from the grapes. And every wine is it's a confident reflection of this land. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I think as grape growers and winemakers, we're always kind of looking at the detail in the way we farm our grapes, and there's a lot of detail that we go through. As I said earlier, Michael Lane, our vineyard manager, he's been working with me for 23 years. He knows every inch. He nearly probably knows every vine. And do you want to meet him?
Oh yeah, sure, Michael. Of course.
Just walk past. There you go.
Hi, very nice to meet you. Good. I heard you're expert of all the vines at the Yangarra.
This is the man.
Maybe. Yeah, behind you looks pretty nice, though.
Oh well, I can only hope that I'm actually here.
Yeah. Awesome. So that growing is.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Sorry, that detail is very important in the vineyard, and but then my job and our team's job is to have a very gentle touch in our winemaking. We want the wines to have there's a concentration that comes from the yield. That means that the wines or the grapes have a lovely concentration of flavor, and the gentleness of touch in terms of the sorting that goes on in the grapes to make sure only the best go through into the fermenter. But then the time on skins, how gently the color and the tannins are extracted out of the skins, And then, you know, the winemaker's approach about not maybe using too much oak, you know, looking after topping the wines in barrel and making sure that they are the best reflection of what this site can deliver.
Wow. All right. So, well, to touch a little bit about, you know, climate change. I mean, we've heard this for the last few years, you know, how the weather it's changing, especially in Europe, and I'm sure the rest of the world. Do you, you know, are you guys geared up and ready? And how do you foresee changes down the road for Yangarra?
Look, I think we are in a cooler kind of part of McLaren Vale. So, and the type of varieties we grow are relatively resilient to warmer vintages. Some of the cooler vintages we make, you know, maybe slightly more elegant wine, and in the slightly warmer wines, they're a little bit more fuller bodied and robust. There's not a huge amount you can do to combat Mother Nature in the way, you know, what gets thrown at you, other than have the kind of varieties that have some form of resilience, you know. And I think these Southern Rhone varieties really have some of that resilience. And the other part is our location is being coastal. We get relatively consistent rainfall. We get relatively consistent vintages of reasonable, moderate weather. So in many ways, we haven't felt the effects of too much extremes, and we've had relatively very reliable harvests over the 20 years that I've been here. But it's not to say that may not change, but we feel that we're in good shape moving forward.
That's great. Well, down the line, is there anything new that we can or should look out for in terms of wines?
Look, I think some of the wines that we talked about, some of these new varieties. We've got two exciting wines that are a blend of the white blend and the red blend. They're simply called Blanc and Noir.
Yes.
Lovely, easy drinking wines, and they've been incredibly successful in their early releases, and we're just starting to get enough of them to be able to actually export. So something to look out in the future. I think they've got a great future, and also have a relative affordability. And then I think, you know, we've just released all our single block wines. You know, they're probably some of the most fastidious wines that we make, off little single patches that, you know, really showcase the best of, say, for example, the Rue Beauty Roussanne, or the High Sands Grenache or Ironheart Shiraz. And yeah, it's always really fun releasing kind of our top wines from the estate.
Yeah, we're waiting on the Roussanne and the Viognier. It's been too long.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, just a couple more questions and we're wrapping this up.
Yeah.
The wine scene in Singapore is definitely on the rise. You know, Gen Y, millennials, they are exploring wine, but the tricky part is actually having them, you know, get out their comfort zone, try something else other than Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, you know, the usual. Do you have any tips on, you know, pushing their boundaries?
Look, I think it's about having an open mind, trusting. You know, the wonderful thing is wine is that you don't actually need to be an expert to enjoy it. There's always, you know, people like yourself, or, you know, people that are in the wine business. It might be a sommelier, it might be a favorite wine shop. There's people they've got wonderful kind of knowledge of wine, and so I would urge those people to just kind of try new things, be experimental, and build trust with you know, somebody that's very knowledgeable, whether that be at a restaurant or at you know, at your favorite wine store, to introduce you to new wines. And amazing new flavors. But the one thing I say is that the younger generation especially are so interested in different flavors and in generally trying new things. So it's an exciting time, and it gives, you know, producers like us to kind of bring wines to the table that, you know, they might not have normally had a look at.
Yeah, like the Viano Viognier. I mean,
Totally.
yeah. When you guys listen to this, and if you heard it from Peter first, gotta try it.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
yeah. Well, our last takeaway for our listeners: what do you think keeps you motivated for the job? And you know, what frame of mind do you wake up every day and going into this job?
I would say probably fear of failure.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think, you know, when you take such pride in the wines that you make, you being somewhat of a perfectionist, you and what actually can sometimes add more kind of expectation when you start to get some success. There's an expectation that you will deliver that amazingness every year.
That's true.
So and with that drives, you know, you to want to make it even better. So and it look, the rewards of people, you know, talking about our wines, that are enjoying our wines, it's incredibly satisfying. So it does drive you to continue to strive to make, you know, the best wine that you can.
Well, I guess fear is your biggest driver.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
a good way.
In a good way. Totally.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you, Peter, for your time. And I hope you guys enjoy listening to Peter explain about Yangarra. And yeah, you have a great day. And
you too. And I hope in the near future, when travel opens up a bit more, maybe we can all be traveling and come and either visit, or we will come and see you.
Definitely. I think harvest season, maybe that should be fun to
Exactly.
have a tour. All right. Thank you, Peter.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Yeah.
All right.